Hey, second grade, it's time for our next skills lesson. This lesson is going to be teaching you a new concept that we have not learned this year yet. I'm going to share my screen with you because I've created a quick little presentation to help me explain. Let me get this stuff out of the way really quickly. Let me see. I want to go to the slideshow. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is two different genres of a story. So the word genre means that we're talking about what type of story it is. So these are words that you've heard before. It's either a fiction book or a nonfiction book, something you probably have heard in first grade, but it's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about in second grade. So I'm going to start. You're going to look at the slideshow on the computer. You can probably see my face in the corner also. The first genre that we're going to talk about today is a genre called fiction. So fiction is a story that is fake or fantasy, a story that is made up. It is something that is not really going to happen or something that can't really happen in real life. The way that I remember this, there's a trick. If you look at my mouse, you can see the word fiction starts with the letter F, and the word fake or fantasy starts with the letter F. So fiction is a book that is fake or fantasy. It's made up. It's not real life. It's not actually going to happen. So I have a couple of examples on the page. You can see Pete the Cat. Pete the Cat would be an example of a fiction book because it's something that is fake or made up. Pete the Cat is a cat that walks around and does human-like things and talks like a human. Those are things that cannot actually happen in real life, so that is why that is a fictional book. The next one in the middle is Clifford, and we know that a big giant red dog is not something that actually exists. It is fake or fiction. It is made up. And lastly, The Cat in the Hat down here is another good example of a popular fiction book because it is fake. It is something that is made up. A cat who goes on different adventures with people. That's something that is totally fake and made up because we know that cats can't talk. All right, so fiction is one genre that we just learned about. The next one is called nonfiction. So up here at the top, you can see something that is a book that is nonfiction is something that is real life. It's true. It has facts inside of it. Normally, a nonfiction book is something that's going to teach us something a lot of the time. It's going to teach us something that is real life, that's actually true. So here's some examples of some nonfiction books. Here's a book about Abraham Lincoln, which is one of the presidents that we learned about this year. So in this book would be actual made up actual true information about Abraham Lincoln's life. Down here we have a book that is an atlas, and an atlas is a book of maps. It has different maps, maybe some state maps and some world maps, so you can find where you're going. So that's true real life information. Here's a science book that would give like science experiments of real life things that you can do, which is why it is nonfiction. A newspaper is another good example of a nonfiction text to read because the newspaper tells us real life things that are going on in our world around us. Here's a history book about the emperor who built the Great Wall of China, which is another thing we learned about this year, which we know is actually true. It's something that is real in our world. And the last one is a magazine. And magazines are another good example of nonfiction because they teach real life articles inside. So let's look again. I'm going to go back if it'll let me. Fiction is something that is fake. Remember the F's. Fiction, fake. Fiction, fake. It's made up. It's not real. Nonfiction is real life stuff that actually happens in our world. So now we're going to look at something that you're going to be familiar with. On one side, the topic of this page is cats. Okay, so on one side I have nonfiction books about cats. These are real life, true books about cats. So you can see here's one that's called Cool Pets for Kids, and it's about cats. So in here it would probably talk about what it would be like if you had a cat for a pet. Down here is cats, questions, and answers. So this would be real life questions about cats and how you would take care of them. So maybe a kid would have asked, what do cats eat? And then inside the book, it would show you the answer of some things that cats eat in real life. And cat care is the last book. So this would be teaching you how to take care of a cat, showing you how to bathe them, how to comb them, how to make sure that they have food and water and be responsible for them. These are all real life, true books. They are called nonfiction books. On the opposite side, we have a fiction, a fake fantasy made up story, and this was one that we read earlier this year, The Cat Bandit. So some examples of why we know The Cat Bandit is fake or fiction is because cats can't really make up plans to steal food from people, and cats can't do the things that the cat bandit was doing in our book, like riding through a zip line and things like that. Those are not actual possible things, which makes it fiction or fake. And the last example that I have here is just a couple of different books that you might be familiar with. Some nonfiction examples, which are actual real life things, would be like the life cycle of a butterfly. That's something that actually happens. If you had a book about volcanoes or a book about elephants, those are real life facts that are inside the book that you can actually make sure are true. On the opposite side, fictional books are fake, like A Bad Case of Stripes. You can't actually turn out with stripes all over you, or Winnie the Pooh. A big bear and a little piglet aren't actually going to be friends in real life. They're not actually going to go on adventures. They're not actually going to be able to talk to each other. So those are some hints to tell us that it is fiction. So if we think about it, fiction and nonfiction are synonyms or antonyms. You should be answering that they're antonyms because they're opposites. They're total opposites from one another. Nonfictions are real life books. Fiction is stories that are made up that are not real life. They're totally opposites. So the reason why we learned about fiction versus nonfiction is because the next reader that we're going to be reading together for the next month is the War of 1812. So I want you to think to yourself, the War of 1812 is an actual war that was actually fought in America. It's something that we learned a little bit about earlier this year, so we'll see how much you know. This book goes a little bit more into detail about the War of 1812. But I want you to think to yourself, is this book a fiction, fake, made up book? Or would this be a nonfiction, real life book? Think to yourself for just a minute. The War of 1812 is something that really happened in America. So would this be a fiction, fake book or a nonfiction, real book? You should have answered nonfiction because this is going to be our first nonfiction reader that we've read that's actual real life history, something that has actually happened. So make sure you check on all the lessons and make sure that you listen to this book because it's really interesting what happens in the War of 1812. Underneath this video is going to be a couple of questions to see if you understand fiction and nonfiction, so make sure you answer them and try your best. See you next time.